If in my high moments I have done some good, offered some service, shed some light, healed some wounds, rekindled some hope, or stirred some runs of apathy and indifference, or in any way along the way helped somebody, then this campaign has not been in vain.
With your host, Andrew Gordon.
Elise Steger, welcome to the Yoga Moves You podcast. How are you today?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. I believe you're in Minnesota, the Minneapolis area?
Yes. Yep, in the Minneapolis metro area.
I was there once, and it was for a radio interview, which was bizarre because I was out of radio 4 years, and an executive with CBS emailed me from an old demo I had sent for a morning show in Houston, and they asked me to audition out in Minneapolis. I wonder if this station is even still there. Buzzin' 1027?
I think it is.
Yeah, it was just launching with Country Station, and the guy who interviewed me was the interim program director. I actually flew out, auditioned with Shane Wells, who's a local personality there. I don't know if you know her. She does TV and did a show together. It was like, hi, how you doing? Let's go in the air and pretend that we know each other. But the guy who interviewed me, he passed, unfortunately, about a couple of years ago, but have you ever seen the movie Private Parts? And then I'll say why.
I think I have, but I don't recall.
Okay, well, Paul Giamatti plays Howard Stern's horrible boss that he had when he went to WNBC in New York City. And it's so legendary in the movie, they brought Howard there just to destroy his career and boost up Imus at the time. And Howard would fight with this guy who Paul Giamatti played, and they called him Pig Vomit in the movie. And he's the guy that interviewed me, and I grew up a big Howard Stern fan. I had left radio for 4 years, and now I'm being called out for this audition to a country station, but they said they wanted to do it like top 40. I'm like, do you hear how I talk? Like, do you understand that I know nothing about country music? They didn't care. So that was my experience with Minneapolis. They ended up saying they loved my storytelling and loved me on the air, but they didn't think I was a good fit for country. I was like, hello, I could have saved you the money for the flight, the hotel, and the time. So I digress. But Elise, I did enjoy my time in Minneapolis, and everyone was friendly, not overly friendly, but not mean.
Minnesota nice. It's a
yes. I love it. Only you could say that because I had never heard that before I went there. In fact, Kevin, who was, again, the guy Paul Giamatti played, had said to me, Andrew, while you're here for the 2 audition shows that you're doing during the weekend, go to pick up a book, which is called How to Speak Minnesotan.
Yep.
It was fascinating. And I heard about like a hot dish.
And you have to say things like, oh, sure, you betcha.
I'm telling you, it's like Fargo.
It is a little bit. Not so much in the Twin Cities area, but yeah, if you go to rural Minnesota, the accent is definitely a bit thicker there.
I can imagine, but they say in the Midwest, that's where the good people are. You know what I mean? Like you're just meat and potatoes, good people. And I really did feel that actually.
That's good. Hopefully you were here not during the winter.
No. But one of my best friends who I started radio with are both from Long Island, where, yes, it gets cold in New York, but not Minnesota cold. What's up, JB, if he's listening? He's up there right now in Minnesota. He's been there for the last 3 years, and I heard about the winters. Yeah.
In fact, we normally are kind of in our spring at this time right now, and we are scheduled to have snow again this weekend.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, and today, it's the 103rd day of 2018, so we're calling this January 103rd. It's not April at all.
Oh, that's funny. You do have the Skyway system there, though, which, again, this is something referencing people listening wouldn't know what I'm talking about, so I just describe it. It's above ground, and it's like an interlocking pathway of above ground tunnels that are glassed in. It's pretty beautiful, actually.
Yeah, they're walkways going from all of one of the major buildings are connected through these walkways, and along these walkways they have restaurants and things. So yeah, it's kind of our way of getting through the city without having to go outside.
You really have to. So since it's so cold there, did you grow up mostly doing indoor activities?
Yes. It's funny. You get people that either absolutely love the snow and they're out and they, are skating or skiing or snowboarding, snowmobiling. And then there's people like me. It's like, ooh, cool, hot tubs.
Yeah, I'm on your side.
Yeah, you guys are going skiing. I'm going to go get a massage and go in the hot tub.
But as a child growing up, did you participate in physical activity? And if so, I'm assuming it was indoors. What
Right.
was it?
I was a swimmer. I was a swimmer for many years.
What was
So,
your event?
I was the individual medley and the 100 breaststroke. Yeah.
Did you take that all the way up through high school and into college?
I took it through high school, and then by the time I actually had a couple college scholarships,
Yes.
but I'm not a natural athlete and I'm not a natural student. And so I'm like, this is going to be way too hard to do both. And so I don't know. Luckily I chose just to go for the student path and went to a non-swimming school.
Where did you go?
I went to the University of Minnesota Duluth because they have an amazing geology program, and that's what I majored in.
Now, what got you into that? I'm fascinated by your current career, which I'll get to.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that you majored in geology. Were you always into things of the earth?
I was, but it's funny because I truly believe that all geologists start out as shiny rock people. That, they're the kids that are like looking down at the ground and digging out the shiny rocks and bringing them home and going, look at this. And It's funny because I remember like being out, we have agates here in Minnesota.
What's that?
I remember it's like you'll have to look it up. It's our state rock. It's
Okay.
kind of a cool rock that has a lot of lines in it. It's a volcanic rock. And I remember being a little kid and being out on the playground and looking for these agates like in the asphalt of the playground. Wow. Yeah. And just playing with those, or even anytime I would come home from, if we go hiking and things is a big thing here. When it gets warm, we want to be outside. So I'd remember hiking with my parents, and by the end of the hike, my pockets were heavy because I pick up so many rocks along the way.
That's a beautiful thing because, nature is available to us. So as a child, if you're into that, for me, growing up 5 minutes from the beach on Long Island, there was shells, always looking at the different seashells, and occasionally, a cool stone that might be there. My wife is very into crystals now. When she does something, she's all in. So she's got the books, and we have we have all these collections of crystals and stones resting by the window with the sun hitting them every day to energize it. Whatever it is, I don't know. She's all about it now. Yeah. And I just think of Breaking Bad, if you've ever seen that, where Schrader, the detective, Heisenberg's brother-in-law, the main character, when he gets injured and he's stuck in bed and he gets really into collecting stones. Yes. and his wife, Marie, comes in with boxes and boxes. And she's like, Hank, your rocks are here. He's like, they're not rocks. They're geodes.
That's so true. You will have to take your wife to Thunder Bay up in Canada.
Good Lord. If you say this, we're going to be in Thunder Bay tomorrow.
Really?
I'm telling you, she is gung-ho. Yeah. What's up in Thunder Bay? Yeah. I know there's hockey there. It's up in Canada.
There's hockey there, but they have amethyst mines, open pit amethyst areas where you can walk in and just find all these super cool big chunks of amethyst.
Oh, Elise, you just put us on our next trip. I hope we go when it gets out of this extended January period.
Right. And that's further north. So, plan it June, July, August.
That actually brings me to a question that just hit me off the top of the head here. Being so close to the border, did you really not think much of just crossing up into Canada when you live so close?
No, it's just kind of going through a gate and then you're there.
Yeah, I always wondered that.
Yeah, no, you pretty much drive up and they'll have you come in, they check your passports, and then you're on your way. It's pretty easy, so.
You just got to trade in You Betcha for a belt.
It's true. All
right, so Elise, you get out of college and you start working, and your current job is a senior project manager at an environmental firm. You describe it, I love this, as a janitor of the earth and protector of human health. Now, before I get to what you actually do, I want to ask you, now, you can answer this or not, but is geoengineering a thing? Because if it is, we're all screwed. Because if there are people who control the weather, they pretty much run the world.
Yeah, right?
I couldn't resist asking you. I'm sorry. I'm not a big conspiracy theorist.
I have a hard time believing that, to be honest. But, it's funny because being a scientist, we actually know that there's a lot we don't know. So I actually think that kind of opens that door for, the yoga, spiritual, holistic thing in a way too. Yeah, I don't know about the geoengineering where there's controllers of weather. That's too scary to think about.
Yeah, and I don't really want to stay and press the topic too long. I just threw it out there because you are of the earth. You work with the earth, What do you actually do in your job without talking about conspiracy theories, whether they're true or not? That's not what we're looking to accomplish.
So I work for an environmental firm, and what we do is we do a lot of investigations of properties, especially if there's someone buying a property that was maybe, we first do what we call a phase one, where we do a report just on paper. We look at the history of a property and what might be there. And then if there's something suspect, either on that property or in the area, we go to phase two, where we would go in and take soil, groundwater, and soil vapor samples to check it out, see what might potentially be there. Now, if they're going to obviously dig into the property, if they're going to reconstruct and have to deal with the soil, that's what we look at. Is there going to be any exposure to the people working on the site?
Wow.
Or people living at that site. And same thing with the soil vapor. That's a big thing that's come up more recently in Minnesota and I think across the nation.
I want to ask you about that, but before I get to what you found and what actually the soil vapor is the firm you work with, are you contracted out through the government or the EPA?
No. I used to be. Yeah, I used to work as an emergency responder for the EPA. And I would work on their sites. But now we no longer, we still work with the local government. They kind of govern us, and so did the EPA, but we're not an EPA contractor.
So what is soil vapor? I have never heard of that. So a layman like myself.
Yeah. So say you're in a building and there is soil or groundwater contamination, and some of the chemicals, a lot of the chemicals are volatile. They'll go up they'll evaporate. Wow. And those will come up into the spaces between, where soil is porous. It'll come up through that. And sometimes they're concerned with that vapor actually coming up through the slab of the building, the subslab. And
wow. That is insane to think about in my mind. My head's about to explode.
Yep. So the thing that I think a lot of people get confused with environmental rules, whether they're state or EPA, is that they're based on human health.
Yes.
They're not based on, of course we love our trees and our beautiful surroundings, but when you get down to it, all of the limitations or the limits that are set for certain things are based on human health. It's all protection of human health.
Yes. And that's why I think your description of your job is cool. It's quirky, right? But but yet it's true. You're a janitor of the earth and protector of human health. You're spot on with what you're doing.
Yeah, literally clean up. We clean things up. We try to, and at least, like I said, for protecting people and residents. And
what's the craziest thing that you found? And like, who? Not who, as in names, but was it residential or commercial? And why were they doing it?
Kind of the scariest thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I can just give you a broad general industry. I was surprised. Dry cleaners are quite the notorious chemical users, we'll say.
Really?
And if you really look at, I thought, oh, dry cleaners, when have they been around? Well, in the last, 20, 25 years, kind of thinking that on my, and you look at them and I'm like, wow, some cleaners have been around since the 1900s. And I'm like, wait, were they using chemicals then? What were they doing? But I think dry cleaners are kind of that notorious industry where things can get scary.
Do they dump it?
I mean, they don't. They shouldn't. I shouldn't say they don't. They shouldn't.
Well, what is the concern? What's the chemical that is the main culprit?
Well, they had solvents. Yeah, solvents. Okay. So they're very volatile. They're easy to get into the groundwater and the soil and the soil vapor. So. Wow.
Okay, there goes my dry cleaning my yoga clothes because I really don't have any other clothes to dry clean.
Don't do that.
I'm lucky. There was a time when I did use dry cleaning. Fortunately, I don't think that it's destroyed my brain yet.
Yeah, don't do that.
It's coming.
Yeah, well, and I tell people, I'm like, if there's anything you can avoid, even in general, we were talking about human health, cancer risks and things are based on compounding things that you're doing, right?
Yeah.
You have a glass that's, a little bit full of whatever you love to do, but you start adding in those risk factors of, oh, I dry clean my clothes. Yeah, I can smell that chemical. Oh, if they smoke, oh my God, that fills the glass pretty quick, So it's those things that you keep filling that glass, and if it overflows, that's not such a good thing.
Elise, I feel I have to ask you this because you have so much knowledge in this area, and this question's coming to me, and I feel like if I don't ask it, I'm doing a disservice for the interview and for people listening. With the spiking levels of autism and dementia, what is going on in the air or the soil or the water? I mean, is that something that you've found some information on?
I have not researched that, to be honest, but like I said, I think with growing chemicals, that's a thing that it could be a factor. Yeah. I wouldn't rule it out. How's that?
Okay. I'm not looking for you to solve this whole thing. I have to ask the questions to the experts, and I'm going to throw you in that. Now let's switch all the way to the other side of things. I love that you're a yogi, but you also love heavy metal. So have you ever played Slayer in any of your classes?
I have not. I had a friend that challenged me to play Metallica, and I actually found like this Yoga Pops, if you've ever heard that. It's kind of this cheesy xylophone.
Sure. I know where you're going with this. They do a take on Metallica, but it's instrumental.
I'm actually looking to put together, not necessarily heavy metal, but a classic rock and roll class sometime in the near future. So,
and since you're, come from a geology background, you could have Led Zeppelin, Get the Lead Out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more from hip hop. One time I played Wu-Tang in a class, and I had to remember in the future, a note to myself, Wu-Tang stays at home.
Yeah. I've had those moments in class, actually, because, my playlist, I when I had an iPod, I had, everything mishmashed on this iPod. And I remember it was like probably my first or second year of teaching.
Yeah.
And I had this lovely, playlist all set out. And luckily everybody was down in child's pose. And I heard the beginning of a Slipknot song.
oh my God.
And luckily it started out really soft, so I had to run over there and change the song. But one of my really good friends, she had similar tastes, and I could see her shoulders just shaking in child's pose because she was laughing at me.
Oh man, I guarantee that there's a lot of people listening who have had those moments and caught it before it happened. I certainly have. I was right there with you as you described that story. I love it. You did your teacher training in 2009. What originally brought you to yoga as a student? Okay.
Well, I lived in the northern part of the Minneapolis area, and there was a big corporate gym there that had yoga, and I took some classes because I really enjoyed them. And then I had just a shift I was still in in the same career, but I had a little shift where I moved to the southern part of the Twin Cities into a smaller town. I was actually in Shakopee, Minnesota, for those of you that know it. And I went there, and there wasn't as many yoga studios, for choices. Their times just didn't match with what I could do, and so I started doing a lot of yoga just at home, like on my own. And at that time, I think I had like a Rodney Yee DVD.
You and about 5 other guests.
I know. And so, I mean, I loved it, but I was kind of like, there has to be more. There has to be more. So I went into teacher training just on my own personal thing. I had no intention of teaching at all. I just wanted to know what else there was. There has to be more poses or things. And really it was mostly physical. There has to be more poses than what I know, right?
Sure, of course.
And then I started the training, and it was like mind exploded, right, on the, wow, there's a whole lot more than just poses, obviously. But I dug my heels in and did not want to teach until the very end. And I think that I kept, my teachers kept saying, oh, when are you going to teach? I'm like, well, no, I'm not going to teach. And then by the end of my training, I was kind of going, okay, if something fell into my lap, I suppose I would teach, right?
Can I ask you, because I had people in my own training that said the same thing, and also trainings that I've led, and they ended up teaching. I wonder if you say in the beginning of training, I'm not really intending to teach, I'm just here to learn, that it's just a subconscious way, or maybe conscious way, of taking expectations and pressure off of you, even though deep down you're like, I really want to teach.
I totally agree, because I was teaching I was teaching my head to myself. That's why I took the training. I'm like, you're at home with, like I said, especially when you're away from the DVDs and away from YouTube, and that's I've pushed my students in the training program to to practice on their own, and it gets in your head. Yes. And so I think it is a thing where that's just that protective nature of like, no, I'll just do it in case something comes up. And it
just reminds me, like, I play basketball and I'm short. Like, I mean, I'm 5'7" on a good day, but I love it. And I really do it for fun. I love to shoot around. But if someone says, yo, you want to play a game? All right. But I don't really play. I'm just, having fun. Deep down, I'm like, I want to kick his ass. But like, I'm just saying it's for fun to take the pressure off in the moment.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
So as a teacher, you went on to dive pretty deep into it, and you developed your own teacher training based on Yoga Sculpt. Can you talk more about that? And is it your own brand that you're looking to come out with? Yeah,
well, my teacher training, just the regular teacher training, the 200-hour training is, just the Yoga Alliance kind of thing. It doesn't have the sculpt part of it. But then separately, I am working on a Yoga Sculpt training, and it is my own brand, because at the time when I got asked to teach Yoga Sculpt, there really wasn't any training there. It wasn't like a thing to get certified in any particular type of yoga. And I went to a couple, classes that were called Yoga Sculpt, and it was kind of that flowing movement with weights. And I thought, oh gosh, this is not for me.
I've never been to one, so that's why I defer to you on the description.
Yeah, I didn't like it. Like, they were trying to do, they'd have the weights in your hands, and they're trying to do downward dog to, trying to do a salutation with weights in your hands. And me, with my background, like I said, I was in swimming and I did weight training. I'm like, this just doesn't seem right. So how did you take what exists as Yoga Sculpt and tweak it, or alter it to your own thing? To my own, I just kind of thought, what, I wanted people that wanted to do the Yoga Sculpt with weight training to have the basics, that if they were to take the training they learned into Yoga Sculpt out into the weight room, they'd feel comfortable with it. So we do basic curls, but obviously I change it up quite a bit. I show them I actually did a lot of research on the bodybuilding or yoga anatomy, or anatomy of bodybuilding, and then like bodybuilding.com. I went on these places and found these different types of things, different, like curls and presses and things. And I thought, which ones can I bring into the yoga studio?
So give me a sample of maybe like a 3 or 4 pose sequence in your Yoga Sculpt class.
Yeah, so we don't have a whole lot of sequencing, like flowing sequence. We do a lot of salutation in between, but say we're going to do a bicep curl. We're going to start, just doing the regular bicep curl form, making sure, shoulders are back. We're squeezing the arms. We're doing this nice and slow and controlled. I always work on people, not to come up. They come up and then they're like, just let it go. They just drop them. And I'm like, nope, nice, slow and controlled. But we might do that to get that form. And then we'll add in those nice little chair pose or squats or things like that. And then maybe we'll do, chair pose curl up to a press. We'll kind of add those things in. I love kind of one that's maybe more of a yoga pose is doing holding weights in Warrior 3, but your weights are down towards the ground. So both weights are down there, and you reach one hand forward and one back. And it challenges both your balance, but also your shoulders. And so it's those little tweaks that we kind of add into the Yoga Sculpt. So, I get it. And I like it. I see where you're going with this. And I've never taken a Yoga Sculpt class, period, but I understand how it works. So yes, it makes sense that you cannot flow with weights because there's a lot of, in my mind, a lot of dangers that can come and just I think people have gotten
things.
I think people have gotten better at that training of, even if they're doing the flowing things, they bring the weights into the core, then they'll shift the pose and then maybe extend the arms with the weights. That's become a lot safer, I think, since, like I said a while ago, it was just kind of this thing of like, hey, let's do yoga with weights.
like correct me if I'm wrong, but in my mind, I see it as you arrive through your yoga asana and your transitions, you arrive at a destination. That's when weights come in, when you're kind of static. I know you're not really static, but you're stopped in that destination. It could be a crescent lunge, and now you're doing some tapping the knee with the weights or lifting up and doing goddess presses. And
goddess is a good one. they love and hate that one of, say you're in goddess pose and you grab, a smaller weight and you reach it up and you're going to, bend the elbows behind your head, and all of a sudden you're adding that tricep press in there.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
I
love it.
I add a lot of, at the end, if we've been working pretty hard, you can tell energy levels of people towards the end. You're like, okay, let's just set the weights aside. And then maybe we'll do some balance stuff and some ending flows, and of course, final Shavasana.
Now, in Shavasana, do you just take a 25-pound plate and drop it on someone's chest?
Pretty much, yeah. That, or I make them hold plank for 5 minutes. No, kidding.
So what's been your favorite thing about teaching and sharing yoga?
Oh, gosh, that's a broad question.
You betcha.
You betcha. I think it's the connection with people, and they walk out just feeling so much better than they did when they were walking in. It makes a huge difference of, like they walk in and you can feel that tension. You can feel, I had this bad day. Or here, oh my God, it's snowing again.
Yeah.
It's a huge factor of how people feel. And once they're done, they're like, oh my gosh, that was the best. Oh, I feel so much better. And I think it's that kind of, that thing of service that makes you feel good.
I really love your answer, and it is a question that could generate a huge number of responses, and I think the response that an individual gives to that really defines your place and where you're coming from when you enter a class. So rather than say, what's your mission when you teach a class, I think that kind of provides the answer. And I really can appreciate your answer and relate to that, and it's probably why I still teach the couple of classes that I do, because I really want to give that service and see people come in one way and leave another. It's just, it's magic. It's the most amazing thing. And it's a gift that you're able to share with people.
Yeah. I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever experienced like yoga burnout where in teaching?
Absolutely. I was a studio owner. I used to teach.
Oh my, yeah.
There was a point I was teaching 30 to 35 classes a week for about 6 months, and I was teaching all the 6 a.m.s from Monday through Friday, and basically every class on the schedule to launch the first studio.
Yeah, that's hard. Yeah. That's really hard.
I lost my practice the first, like, I mean, I taught for years before I owned a studio, and I kept my practice.
Yeah.
I still taught about 5 classes a week, but when I got the studio and just being immersed in the business of it, and then also being immersed in teaching, you know, so many classes and having to be the last minute sub in case someone bailed.
Yeah.
I lost my practice. It was impossible because I don't know if you do physical adjustments, but I mean, I was taught to adjust people. So the amount of energy that, and of course, if it, you know, it was my studio, so I didn't want it to suck. So I'm putting everything into every class, which really, in hindsight, I learned to balance my energy as the years went by with the studios. But from the first 6 months of that first blast, I was assisting everyone in every pose. And I was like, you know, I would come home at the end of a week after teaching so many classes, and I would just tell my wife, like, I'm broken. So how am I going to practice? I mean, like, physically, I feel like my body went through, you know, a war, and mentally I'm zapped, and I would just stare at a wall.
Yep. Just that just listening to you, I could just see the energy. I could relate 100% of that energy drain there. Yeah.
And you know, Elise, one of the things that helped me get out of those funks was taking classes with other teachers, because you're now being led, and it's just such a beautiful thing when you're teaching so much, just to be the student. I mean, you just want to be the student.
Yes, totally agree. I try to take classes from others, you know, at least once a week, sometimes a couple times a week, just like you said, just so you don't, and it gets that teacher out of my head. Remember I was saying, you know, when you practice on your own, I still have that teacher, like, breathe in and, you know, kind of thing in my head. So when I have to listen to someone else, it helps to. It
allows us, I believe, and I think based on what you're saying, it allows us to kind of fully let go and embrace the moment as a student, to check out so that we can fully check in.
Exactly.
So I was going to ask you as a follow-up question, and maybe you have an additional answer, because I believe you just answered it. What has been one of your biggest challenges as a teacher? So in addition to burnout, is there anything else that comes to your mind?
Just that, like you said, that balance. Like I was also in a teaching situation where there was a studio, and they had, you know, it was in a small town, so there wasn't a lot of teacher resources, and I was really trying to keep this studio afloat, and trying, you know, okay, I can do. I was literally the same thing, teaching almost every day, and then like 2 or 3 classes on Saturday morning, just trying to keep it fresh. You know, it's like it's a small town. It's the same students coming in.
That's
so
right.
I can't do 5 of the same classes. Yeah. And I remember my daughter, one time I said, I have yoga. And she's, you have yoga again? And I knew, I was like, I don't want yoga to be a bad word, or to, you know, for them to think that that's taking me away from them. So I had to kind of find that balance. And actually the yoga studio that was there, it did close doors shortly after that. It was sad, but in a way it was like a relief. I was like, oh yeah. And then I remember shortly after that, my daughter had made a picture, and I still have it. And it's like, yoga makes you a better mom. I'm like, yep, that is what is needed. Not, oh, you have yoga.
This is why I love doing the show. I mean, that story is just so touching to me, because I can relate to it. And I don't have kids, but being married, I never got to spend time with my wife. You know, I bought my first studio 6 months before. We pushed back our wedding date in order to see if the studio would be okay. And, you know, it took over my life following picking up a second studio for the next like 3.5 years until this last January. I said, everyone that comes to the studio is seemingly happy, but I'm miserable.
Yeah.
And I chose to just close them. And I've been so happy, and I actually love yoga again. I love talking about it. I love practicing. I love teaching. I teach a couple of times at a gym. And the reason I chose to teach at a gym is because the people that come there are just so grateful to learn. They don't know much about yoga, and they love, because there's no expectations. It's part of their membership. It's free. And it's right back to where I started when I first started teaching. And it's like a catharsis for me, for real.
Yeah, I teach both at a gym and a studio, and different feels, but of like the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
But the people are just genuinely grateful and happy to have you there. So yeah.
Yeah, you know, and I spend a lot of time at home because of the podcast, and I also produce and edit, you know, other podcasts. Now, this is not a complaint. I'm just saying that by teaching those couple of classes a week at the gym, I now have faces that I love to see and connect with during the week. They become your friends, like, you know, it's like, hey.
Absolutely.
And that's the beautiful thing, which is yoga is this form of connecting, and you are the guide of that particular connection, but then you talk afterwards, and it's just, I love that. You know, it's such a beautiful place for people to connect ultimately after a certain amount of time. Usually it happens. So what are some of the ways that yoga has helped you off the mat?
Oh, off the mat. Good question.
Thank you.
Well, in you know, I have the kind of the Yoga Sculpt thing, but I also teach, you know, kind of a regular flow class, but restorative has probably been the best teacher for me in this last, probably I've taught it a little over, it's almost 2 years now. And it's really taught me that slowing down is a success.
Yes, I love that,
you know,
the way you phrased that.
It's so true, because I thought, oh, multitasking, and that's totally how I was. I was like, oh, I can take on this project, and I can do that, and I can run over here and you know, do 10 things, but I was doing 10 things not so well. So
right, and even if you did them well,
yeah,
you know,
they weren't my best.
but even if they did appear well aesthetically, which, you know, that's a possible thing, energetically in your heart, you knew that in your mind they were not well, even though they even if they were well to who you handed them to. It's
totally taught me to sit back, and because instead of just giving an answer, giving a thoughtful answer, you know, or a mindful answer to even questions at any in work or, you know, personal or anything. It's really taught me, just like I said, slowing down can be a greater success than always constantly trying to come up with the next thing or move on to the next thought. So
it's very reminiscent of the asana practice to me, and also pranayama, but I'm going to use the example of asana in this case, that if you go to a class, a vinyasa class, where it moves very fast, sometimes the transitions kind of just get blurred into the mix of the class. But if you really focus on the transitions as being some of the most important pieces of the asana practice, it's the spaces in between, right, that sometimes get brushed aside. But those transitions, or in this case, you're saying just take a pause, right? It's almost like, now to go to pranayama, the space in between our inhales and exhales is this beautiful, almost eternity of short-lived time, but really so powerful if we really look at it that way. The spaces in between where you just are pausing.
It's funny you said that, because just last night I taught a flow class, and I told them, I go, I teach a little bit slower. We hold the poses a little bit longer, which isn't necessarily easy, right?
No,
But even slowing down those transitions, I kept telling them, enjoy the journey from one pose to the next. So, yeah.
It's so true. I love it, and I'm glad that we were able to speak on that a little bit. It doesn't come up as much as I would expect it to in interviews, but I'm happy it came up today because it was on my mind. So where can people find you? And in addition to that, what do you plan for the future? You have this Yoga Sculpt training. Are you going to call it Sculptasana, Skoga?
I have no idea.
Geo-NJ yoga.
Geocaching yoga. We could do that.
All right. Yeah.
Right now, currently, I teach at the Anytime Fitness in Chaska, Minnesota.
Nice.
That's where I do my Sculpt and Flow.
Very
and
cool.
then I teach at the Yoga Bar in Shakopee, Minnesota. And that is where I'm teaching restorative yoga. And that is also where I have the yoga teacher training school. So, yeah.
Well, you know what? How about this? If anyone's in your area, because this is very localized, what you're doing, which is fine. I mean, you don't have to have this online presence to be on the show, but I do want to help you. So we do have listeners from all over. How can they get in touch with you for that yoga teacher training that you teach in that area?
Oh, we are on Facebook, the Yoga Bar, and I believe it's like the Yoga Bar MN. Or you can find me at Dragonfly Yoga and Rock Solid Personal Training. Guess what? Rock, get it?
Yeah.
And if you like, I can give out my email address.
Yeah, I'm going to actually, you can say it, and I'm going to ask you to send me it so I can put it in the show notes, because right now, the only thing my brain just said is Jello. I don't know why, but it's like jello@gmail.com. I have no idea what just happened.
My email address is namaste, Namaste, and it is 35173 at gmail.com. So namaste 35173 at gmail.com.
Now I'm confused. Why the namaste? No, I'm just kidding.
No, you're confused about why 35173, aren't you?
Well, do tell.
It's my name upside down.
Ooh, uh-oh, you're going to put me...
Yep.
Oh, man. Now I'm going to do a headstand.
Yep, Elise, Elise is 35173.
Elise, I got to tell you, it was such a joy to talk to you. Today I woke up and I hadn't moved much yet, physically. I like to move, even if it's not yoga. I like to just stimulate my body, which stimulates the mind in certain movements, and I hadn't done it yet. But talking to you really lifted my energy up. So I love it. And I'm sure you do that for your community that you serve and who you teach to. So Elise Steger, you betcha. It was great to have you on. And I hope that your 103rd day of winter is the last one that you're experiencing.
I agree. I hope so, even though we have storms this weekend. But yes, thank you so much for talking to me and having me as a part of your podcast. I love it.
It was a pleasure. The pleasure is mine. Thank you. Elise Steger, there she is.
Yoga Moves You Podcast.